The US president also saying he will, quote, definitely impose trade tariffs on the European Union after slapping import taxes, as we just heard, on Canada, or he will do so in around 16 hours, Canada and Mexico and China. Concerns in the EU as bloc leaders meet the British Prime Minister and the head of NATO in Brussels. Although we're looking at how to step up European defence in the face of Russian aggression on the battlefield. A demand repeated over the years and across administrations in Washington for NATO to spend more on defence. US President Trump insisting NATO countries need to double their defence spending target to 5% of GDP, while also promising personally to bring a swift end to Russia's war in Ukraine. The EU gathering being called a triple first is the first time all 27 EU leaders are meeting since Mr. Trump's inauguration. Their first ever dedicated talks on defence and their first with a British Premier since Brexit. FMO Will Denselow joins us live from Brussels. Will, Mr. Trump saying he will impose tariffs on the European Union. Why is this the case and how has the EU responded thus far?
Well, when it comes to the why, Donald Trump essentially says that the trade relationship, which is worth some $1.6 trillion each year between the EU and the US, is intrinsically unfair. Donald Trump says that the EU pours plenty of goods onto US shores and doesn't take much from the United States in return. That is a point that has been rejected by officials here in Brussels, saying that yes, there might be a trade deficit when it comes to goods. EU officials, though, say that is largely offset by a surplus of US services coming here to Europe. Now, even months before the US presidential election back in November, the EU had already put in place a task force to prepare for the possibility of a Trump presidency, because according to analysts, the EU was rather taken off guard back in his first term in office when he slapped tariffs on European steel and aluminium. So this task force was to better prepare this time around. Now it seems that we could well find out if their preparations will be well served, considering the fact that the EU had previously said they'd be willing to buy more US liquefied natural gas, perhaps in a way to appease Donald Trump and ease the threat of a trade war. But we've heard just a little earlier from Kaja Kallas, Europe's top diplomat, speaking here at the Egmont Palace behind me, speaking to reporters, saying that Europe is prepared. But she added that there is no winner in a trade war, saying that essentially China would be laughing if there was to be a trade spat between the EU and US.
Well, apart from fending off an attack on the economic front, the EU is meeting the NATO leader and the UK Prime Minister. So NATO, something that's always or has been on the agenda in the last few years, of course, is what's happening in Ukraine.
That's absolutely right. And leaders from the 27 EU member states are gathering here at the Egmont Palace, and defence is the primary issue that they will be discussing during the next few hours. We've heard from Antonio Costa, the European Council President, who said that really discussions will boil down to three topics: collaboration, financing and partnerships. Partnerships, like you mentioned, those include EU and NATO working closely together, especially on the issue of defence spending. Donald Trump has said that he wants NATO members to spend upwards of 5%. Mark Rutte, the NATO Secretary General, wants that close to 3%. That will be a major area of discussion. On the topic of collaboration, well, as you mentioned, Keir Starmer, the British Prime Minister, will be here for talks. The first time a PM has come and met with EU leaders since Brexit. So that's significant in of itself. And security collaboration when it comes to defence will be a key topic of conversation. Also to be discussed, the issue of Greenland and Donald Trump's threats of taking it over. We've heard from Mette Frederiksen, the leader of Denmark, who has reiterated that Greenland, a territory of Denmark, is not for sale. But she did say that there are valid security concerns for the Arctic that Donald Trump has raised, and that she says she is willing to allow the US to expand its footprint, but very much reiterating that sovereign borders must be respected.
Our Will's Denselow reporting live from Brussels on a triple first meeting involving EU leaders, the UK Prime Minister and the NATO chief.